Today we are going to learn how to solve a new type of equation. And those are equations that we need to solve using roots. And what we need to remember is that exponents and roots are inverse operations. They undo one another. So if we have something with a root, the inverse operation would be an exponent. And if we have something with an exponent, the inverse operation would be a root. So here I have x squared equals 81. So this is something to the second power, something squared. So the inverse operation would be the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And the square root of x squared, since those are inverse operations, they undo one another and you are left with x. And then we know that the square root of 81 is 9. But we have to be careful here because think about what times itself equals 81. What times itself equals 81? Well, remember we talked about in the previous video that every number has two square roots. 9 times 9 is 81, but negative 9 times negative 9 is also 81. So this equation has two solutions. If we were to plug in 9, 9 squared is 81. If we were to plug in negative 9, negative 9 squared is 81. So we can write 9 or negative 9, but remember we have a way to write this that's a little bit of a shortcut. We can say plus or minus 9. So x can be positive 9 or negative 9. That is the solution to that equation. So the next one says x squared equals 121. Well, the inverse operation to squaring is taking the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared, since those are inverse operations, we end up with x. And the square root of 121 is what? It's 11, but it can also be negative 11. So we have to say x is plus or minus 11. So remember that squared equations have two solutions. Here's a fraction. X squared equals 49 over 100. The inverse operation of squaring is taking the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x. And notice that this is a fraction where the numerator is a perfect square and the denominator is perfect square. So we're going to take the square root of 49 and we're going to take the square root of 100. So the square root of 49 is what? It's 7. The square root of 100 is what? It's 10. And remember that this could be a positive 7/10 or a negative 7/10. Look at this next one. X squared equals negative 36. So what is the inverse operation to squaring? Taking the square root. So I am going to take the square root of both sides, and the square root of x squared is x. What times itself equals negative 36? Nothing times itself equals negative 36. 6 times 6 is 36, and negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Nothing times itself equals negative 36. So for now, to us, this equation has no solution. Can't be done. So look at all of these equations. Notice that the squared term, the x squared, has something else on the same side of the equal sign with it. So your first job is to use your equation operations and isolate the squared term. Okay, so you have to isolate the squared term. So here I have x squared plus 4 equals 13. So I have to subtract 4 from both sides. I get x squared equals 13 minus 4 is 9. Now you are ready to take the square root of both sides, solve this equation, and tell me what the solution to this equation is. If x squared is 9, then x can be plus or minus 3, positive 3 or negative 3. The next one, 4x squared equals 36. So this is 4 times x squared. So we are going to divide both sides by 4, and we get x squared equals 9. I wonder what the answer is. Okay, you finish this equation and tell me the solution. If x squared is 9, then x is still plus or minus 3. Okay, look at the next one. 2x squared minus 1 equals 49. This looks like a two-step equation, right? So we're going to add 1 to both sides, and we get 2x squared equals 49 plus 1 is 50. We're going to divide both sides by 2, and we get x squared is 25. If x squared is 25, tell me what the solution to this equation is. If x squared is 25, then x is positive 5 or negative 5. These equations, remember, often have two solutions. Okay, look at the next one. X squared plus 14 equals 5. Tell me what I'm going to do first. I subtract 14 from both sides. 5 minus 14 is negative 9, and I get x squared equals negative 9. What number times itself equals negative 9? No number, right? The square root of a negative number does not exist in the real numbers on the number line. So since this cannot happen, we would say that this has no solution. Okay, so now let's look at the equation involving cubes, or the third power. So here I have x to the third power, or x cubed, equals 125. What do you think the inverse operation of cubing is? It's taking the cube root, right? So we're going to take the cube root of both sides, the cube root of x cubed, those are inverse operations, so that's just x, and the cube root of 125 is 5. A cube root only has one answer, okay? 5 times 5 times 5 is positive 125, but negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 is negative 125. So a cubic equation involving cubes, will only have one answer, not two. All right, so here's a fraction. X cubed equals 8 over 1,000. So we're going to take the cube root of both sides. The cube root of x cubed is x. And you tell me, what is the cube root of 8 over 1,000? So recall that when we have a fraction that way, we split it up. We want the cube root of the numerator. The cube root of 8 is 2. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And the cube root of 1,000 is 10. 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. 2 tenths will simplify. We get 1/5. Now, here's another way that cubic equations are different from squared equations. A squared equation can have two solutions. It can also have no solution because you can't take the square root of a negative number. But look at this one. X cubed equals negative 27. If I take the cube root of both sides, cube root of x cubed, those are inverse operations, that's x. The cube root of negative 27, is there something times itself 3 times that equals a negative? And there is, right? Negative 3. So negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9, times a negative 3 is a negative 27. So you can take the cube root of a negative number, where you can't do that for taking the square root of a negative number. All right, here's one that we have to fix up just a little bit. I have 6 times x cubed equals 384. I'm going to divide both sides by 6. So I get x cubed equals 384 divided by 6 is 64. Now I'm going to use my inverse operation. So I'm going to take the cube root of both sides. So the cube root of x cubed is x. What is the cube root of 64? The cube root of 64 is a positive 4. Now you know how to solve equations with squares and cubes.